This line is for business class only.
I understand.
Ma'am, we did not expect you here.
Flight canceled.
What do you mean, canceled? We've been waiting hours!
Power does not announce itself. It waits. It does not rush to be seen. It does not demand recognition. It understands something louder forces never will. That true dominance does not live in noise, but in control. The terminal of Gate A17 moved like a machine designed for precision. Steel and glass reflected cold light across polished floors where footsteps echoed in calculated rhythm. Screens flickered with departures and delays, voices layered over one another in polite urgency. Travelers formed lines, not just by destination, but by status. Priority, business, economy. Hierarchy was not spoken here, it was displayed, and everyone understood their place. She entered without hesitation. No entourage, no announcement, no visible symbol of importance. Just a woman in a tailored charcoal coat, the fabric falling perfectly along her frame. The kind of precision that did not come from fashion trends, but from discipline. Her movements were unhurried, deliberate, as if time adjusted itself around her rather than the other way around. Her heels touched the marble floor with quiet authority, not loud enough to demand attention. Just enough to mark presence. People noticed her, but only briefly, a passing glance, a momentary assessment, then dismissal. To them, she was another traveler, another face in transit. They were wrong. Her eyes moved across the terminal, not wandering, not curious, measuring, observing. Every detail registered, the efficiency of the check-in counters, the posture of the staff, the subtle impatience in the economy line. Even the silence between announcements carried information. She missed nothing. In her right hand, a phone vibrated once. She did not look at it immediately. The vibration stopped, then came another, and another, persistent, insistent. Finally, she lowered her gaze, not rushed, not reactive, and glanced at the screen. Messages stacked one after another, urgent, time-sensitive, marked with priority, assistants, executives, a board member. She read none of them. Her thumb hovered for a fraction of a second before the screen went dark again. Ignored. Around her, urgency grew. A man in a navy suit spoke loudly into his headset, his voice edged with irritation. A woman argued at the counter about her seat assignment. A child cried, sharp and unfiltered, cutting through the carefully maintained order of the space. Noise filled the air, and yet she remained untouched by it. There was no tension in her shoulders, no impatience in her breath. She did not check the time. She did not shift her weight. Stillness in a place designed to move. It was not passivity, it was control. She approached the airline counter reserved for premium passengers. The line was short, efficient, structured. Ahead of her, a man adjusted his cufflinks with visible impatience, glancing repeatedly at his watch. Behind the counter, staff moved with rehearsed politeness, their smiles precise but hollow, their tone practiced. Transaction after transaction. Identity verified, boarding passes printed, luggage tagged, a system that rewarded status. When her turn came, she stepped forward. No announcement. No expectation, just presence. The staff member did not look up immediately. Fingers continued typing, eyes fixed on the screen. A moment passed longer than it should have. Then, finally, acknowledgement, but not recognition. Next, the agent said, voice flat, already halfway into the next routine. She placed her identification and ticket on the counter. No words, no explanation. The agent took them with minimal interest, scanning quickly. Too quickly. A glance, a pause. Something flickered in the agent's expression. Not understanding, not yet, but a momentary hesitation. Then it vanished. Assumption replaced it. Behind her, the line shifted. Someone exhaled loudly. Another checked their watch. Time mattered here. Status mattered more. The agent's tone changed subtly, almost imperceptibly, but enough. A fraction less polite. A fraction more dismissive. It was small, but it was there. She noticed. Of course she noticed. She noticed everything, but she did not react. She did not correct. She did not clarify. She simply stood there, composed, watching the system reveal itself exactly as it was. The phone in her hand vibrated again, longer this time. A call. The name on the screen carried weight, influence, urgency. She declined it, without hesitation, without expression. The agent continued typing, unaware of what had just been dismissed, unaware of who stood across the counter. Around them, the airport continued its mechanical rhythm. Announcements echoed, lines moved, voices rose and fell. Everything appeared normal, but something had already shifted. Not in the room, in the balance, because power had entered the space, and it had chosen silence. She lifted her gaze slightly, meeting the agent's eyes for the first time. Not challenging, not confrontational, just present. And in that moment, there was something beneath the surface. Something controlled, something precise, like an apex predator that had not yet decided to move. The agent looked away first, a small detail, but details mattered. Always. Another message appeared on her phone. Then another, then another, then another, each one carrying urgency the room could not comprehend. Each one ignored, because none of it required her attention. Not yet. She slid the phone back into her coat pocket, her posture unchanged, her expression unreadable. No one in that terminal understood what stood in front of them. No one recognized the weight of the silence she carried. And that was the point, because power did not need recognition to exist, it only needed timing, and hers had not come yet. Somewhere above, a departure was announced. Boarding would begin soon. The system would continue. The hierarchy would enforce itself, and the room would make its judgment. A quiet woman, alone, unremarkable, easily placed, easily dismissed. They would decide where she belonged, and she would let them. For now, because silence, when used correctly, is not weakness, it is preparation. And the question lingered unspoken, invisible to everyone except the one who already knew the answer. Why would someone this powerful choose to remain unseen? The first fracture in order never arrives loudly. It slips in quietly, disguised as procedure. "Excuse me, ma'am, this line is for business class." The voice cut through the air with unnecessary sharpness. Not a request, not a question, a correction. The agent had changed. The previous one had stepped away, replaced by a man whose authority existed only within the narrow frame of his counter. His uniform was pressed too tightly, his posture too rigid, as if he needed the structure to feel significant. His name tag gleamed. His tone did not. She did not move immediately, not out of defiance, not out of confusion, out of choice. "I am aware," she replied, her voice even controlled, untouched by the edge in his. It was not defensive. It was not apologetic. It was factual. He barely listened. His eyes had already made a decision long before her words arrived. They scanned her quickly, categorizing, simplifying, not with curiosity, but with conclusion. A few heads turned. Attention is drawn not by truth but by tone. Behind her, a man shifted impatiently, adjusting his expensive watch in a gesture that felt rehearsed. A woman near the divider leaned slightly, her gaze sharpening with interest. The subtle hum of the terminal adjusted itself, curiosity threading through it. A scene was forming. She remained still. Between them lay the ticket. Valid, verified, undeniable. He did not look at it again. Procedure in the wrong hands becomes a weapon, not of order but of assumption. "I have a ticket," she said. No emphasis, no insistence, just clarity. He exhaled through his nose, a small display of irritation dressed as professionalism. "Ma'am," he began slower now, as if speaking to someone who required assistance understanding basic structure. "I need you to step aside and allow the next passenger through. If you have a question, you can address it over there." He gestured vaguely toward a secondary desk, not a solution. A dismissal. The man behind her stepped forward slightly, emboldened by the shift. His presence pressed against the invisible boundary, eager to reclaim what he believed was rightfully his. Time, priority, status. He did not speak, but his silence was louder than hers. Phew. The agent's attention had already moved past her. Decision made, case closed, except it was not, because she had not moved. Not yet. There was no anger in her expression, no visible resistance, just a pause long enough to register, short enough to remain controlled. In that pause, something subtle unfolded. She observed him, not as an obstacle, not as a threat, as data, his posture, his tone, the speed at which he dismissed evidence in favor of assumption, the comfort with which he redirected authority he did not fully possess, all of it noted, filed. Understood. A system reveals itself best in moments like this, not when it functions, when it fails. Around them whispers began, soft, contained, curious. She is in the wrong line. Why is she arguing? Some people just do not follow rules. The words were not meant to reach her. They did. Of course they did. Perception is rarely private. She heard every syllable, every assumption wrapped in quiet judgment. None of it surprised her. None of it mattered. Because noise is predictable, and predictable things are easy to control. The agent tapped the counter lightly, impatience leaking through the surface. "Mom, I'm going to have to ask you one last time. Please step aside." Authority borrowed and brittle. He expected resistance. He expected explanation. He expected emotion. He received none. She picked up her ticket. The motion was smooth, unrushed, final. Without a word, she stepped out of the line. No argument, no protest, no attempt to correct him. The shift was immediate. The man behind her moved forward with visible relief, his shoulders loosening as if order had been restored. The agent turned his attention to him instantly, tone adjusting, posture refining. "A good afternoon, sir." Polite, respectful, proper. The system, satisfied, resumed its rhythm. And she stood to the side, not excluded, repositioned. There is a difference. Her gaze remained on the counter, not lingering, not confrontational, simply present, watching. The whispers faded as quickly as they had formed. Interest dissolves once a conclusion is reached. The room had decided what this moment meant. A misunderstanding, corrected. A passenger, redirected. Nothing more. They were wrong. Because nothing had been resolved. It had only begun. Her phone vibrated again. A call, persistent, insistent. She did not answer. Instead, her attention shifted, not outward, but inward. A recalibration, a quiet alignment of thought and timing. The line moved forward. Names were called, boarding passes printed. Everything appeared stable, but systems rarely detect their own fractures. She slipped her ticket back into her coat, her fingers precise, her movements measured. No sign of frustration, no trace of discomfort, only control. Because the moment had not been about access. It had been about exposure, and exposure, when handled correctly, becomes leverage. She took a step back, positioning herself where she could see everything without being seen. The agent, the passengers, the structure of authority unfolding exactly as designed, exactly as expected. Her silence was not acceptance. It was calculation. Because correction, when delivered too early, loses its impact. Timing is what gives truth its weight, and hers had not yet arrived. A boarding announcement echoed overhead, smooth and impersonal. Priority passengers first. The line advanced. The system continued, and she allowed it, for now. Because the most dangerous response is not the one that comes immediately. It is the one that waits. And the question lingered again, sharper now, heavier beneath the surface. Why would someone accept something so clearly wrong? Disrespect, when left unchallenged, rarely retreats. It evolves. Is there a problem here? The voice arrived with authority, but not intelligence. A supervisor stepped into the space, summoned not by necessity, but by discomfort. Her presence carried the illusion of resolution. Clipboard in hand, expression already tilted toward judgment. She did not ask for facts. She asked for confirmation. The agent responded first, eager, rehearsed. "She was in the wrong line," he said, gesturing briefly, dismissively. The light redirected her, but she seems confused. A pause before the last word. Intentional, carefully chosen. The supervisor's eyes moved toward the woman standing just beyond the counter. A glance, a scan, a conclusion. The process was efficient, too efficient. "I see," the supervisor replied, her tone softening into something that resembled patience but carried the weight of condescension. "Mom, if you do not have a business class ticket, you will need to proceed to the economy line," she pointed. Not aggressively, not rudely, but definitively. Across the terminal, past the structured calm of priority boarding, toward a line that stretched longer, moved slower, and carried a different kind of energy. Less polished, less respected. More visible. The woman did not respond immediately. Silence again, not empty, not passive, full, heavy. She reached into her coat and placed the ticket on the counter once more. The movement was precise, undeniable, a quiet contradiction. The supervisor glanced at it briefly, too briefly. Her eyes did not settle long enough to absorb truth. They skimmed, filtered through expectation rather than fact. "Ma'am," she repeated, a little firmer now, as if repetition could reshape reality. "You are holding up the line." Behind them, tension began to gather. Passengers shifted not out of concern, but irritation. Time was being interrupted. Order was being delayed. And delay in a place like this is a form of offense. A man in a tailored blazer stepped closer, his voice cutting through the growing discomfort. If she does not belong here, she should move, he said loudly, not to her, but to the space around her. Some of us actually paid for priority. Agreement followed in murmurs, soft, affirming, predictable. Another voice joined, sharper, less restrained. Exactly, a woman added, folding her arms. There is a system for a reason. You cannot just walk into any line you want. They were not addressing her, they were performing. Status when threatened seeks reinforcement, and nothing reinforces status like collective dismissal. A security officer approached next. Slow steps, measured, visible, authority now formalized. What seems to be the issue? He asked, his tone neutral, but his presence unmistakably aligned with the staff. The supervisor answered before the woman could. A passenger is refusing to comply with boarding procedures, she said. Clean, simplified, incorrect, incorrect. The officer nodded slightly, accepting the version offered to him without question. His gaze moved toward the woman, not with curiosity, but with expectation. He said, calm but firm. I am going to need you to follow instructions and proceed to the appropriate line. Appropriate? A word that carries weight when misused. The woman looked at him, truly looked, not with defiance, not with fear, with clarity. In that moment, something subtle shifted again, because she was not being assessed anymore. She was assessing every voice, every posture, every decision made without verification. A pattern was forming. And patterns, once understood, can be dismantled. The man in the blazer laughed under his breath, loud enough to be heard. This is ridiculous, he said. We are all waiting because someone thinks rules do not apply to them. The words landed exactly where they were meant to, not as argument, as reinforcement. The supervisor straightened slightly, encouraged by the support. Authority grows louder when it feels backed. Mom, this is your final notice, she said. Please move to the economy line. Final, a word used to end conversations, not to begin consequences. For the first time, the woman moved. Not toward the counter, not toward the supervisor, toward the direction indicated. The economy line. The shift was immediate. Relief washed through the space, subtle but collective. Order restored, disruption removed. The man in the blazer stepped forward without hesitation, reclaiming his position. The supervisor relaxed, her shoulders lowering slightly as control reasserted itself. The system had corrected itself, or so it believed. She walked without urgency, each step measured, balanced. There was no humiliation in her posture, no trace of defeat, only alignment. Because placement in structure like this is not always imposed. Sometimes it is chosen. She reached the economy line and stopped, not at the back, not fully integrated, just close enough to belong. Just distant enough to observe. Around her the atmosphere shifted, less polished, more chaotic, voices louder, movements less restrained, a different hierarchy, a different rhythm, and she absorbed it all, like a strategist studying terrain before a decisive move. Her eyes moved once more across the terminal, back to the counter, the agent, the supervisor, the passengers who had spoken without knowledge. Each one placed themselves exactly where they needed to be, each one revealing something useful. The security officer returned to his position, satisfied. The supervisor resumed her role, confident. The loud passengers settled into comfort, validated. Noise had won. Silence had stepped aside, or so it seemed. Her phone vibrated again. This time she did not reach for it, because she already knew the moment was approaching, and everything was now in position. From a distance, she watched the system continue, efficient, structured, blind, and within her stillness, something precise began to take shape. Not reaction, not emotion, execution, because silence, when sustained long enough, does not signal surrender. It signals intent, and the question lingered sharper now, impossible to ignore. Was this submission or preparation? Power does not rush to correct a mistake. It studies it. From the economy line, the terminal revealed itself more clearly. Distance stripped away. Illusion. What once appeared structured now showed its fractures, small inefficiencies, subtle biases, predictable behaviors repeating without awareness. She stood still, not waiting, watching. Her gaze moved with precision, no longer scanning broadly, but narrowing. Individuals became variables. Roles became functions. The system, once abstract, now unfolded like a diagram laid bare. The agent at the counter, impulsive, eager to assert control without verification. The supervisor, dependent on assumption, confident in incomplete authority. The security officer, procedural, aligned with order rather than truth. And the passengers, the loud ones, the observers, the silent supporters of whatever preserved their position. Each one placed, each one understood. There was no anger in her assessment, no personal weight attached to their actions. This was not about them. It was about the structure that allowed them to act without consequence. Her phone vibrated again. She reached for it this time, slowly, deliberately. The screen illuminated her face for a brief moment, revealing nothing beyond calm focus. Messages continued to stack. Names that carried influence far beyond the walls of the terminal. Executives, directors, a legal advisor. She ignored them all, except one. Her thumb hovered for a fraction of a second before selecting a single thread. No urgency, no hesitation. Just decision. The message she typed was brief, without emotion. Then she pressed send. No follow-up, no confirmation. The phone returned to her side. One action. Contained. Invisible to everyone around her. But impact does not require visibility to exist. Across the terminal, nothing changed, not immediately. The agent continued his routine, now more relaxed, his tone lighter with the next passenger. The supervisor exchanged a quiet word with a colleague, her posture reflecting quiet satisfaction. Even the security officer had shifted back into passive observation, his presence reduced to formality. They believed the moment had passed, that the disruption had been resolved, that control had been maintained. Carelessness followed. It always does, because confidence built on assumption is fragile. And fragility reveals itself in subtle ways. The agent no longer checked tickets as carefully. The supervisor's attention drifted, her vigilance softened. The structure remained, but its precision had dulled. They had stopped looking. And that was when systems became vulnerable. She shifted her weight slightly, a minimal movement, almost imperceptible. Not discomfort, adjustment. Her eyes returned to the counter, but her focus had deepened. It was no longer about observing behavior, it was about mapping consequence. Time, sequence, impact, each variable aligned in silence, forming a pattern only she could see. Her phone vibrated again. A call, different this time. Higher priority, the kind that bypasses layers. She looked at the screen briefly, then declined it, without expression, without pause. Control is not demonstrated by answering every demand. It is demonstrated by choosing when not to. Around her, the economy line advanced slowly, unevenly. Passengers shifted, sighed, checked their watches. A child tugged at a parent's sleeve. A man muttered under his breath about delays. Noise continued, predictable, unfocused. None of it reached her, because she was no longer part of the environment. She was above it, not physically, strategically. A document opened on her phone, brief, structured. Numbers, agreements, operational dependencies, the kind of information that does not belong in public spaces, yet followed her wherever she went, a quiet confirmation of something larger, something connected. Her eyes moved across it once. Then the screen went dark again. No hesitation, no need to revisit, because she already knew. Across the terminal, the boarding process accelerated. Announcements echoed with increased urgency. Priority passengers moved forward, their pace confident, their expectations intact. The man in the blazer who had spoken earlier now stood at the front, his posture relaxed, his expression restored. He believed he had secured his position. He believed the system had worked. He was wrong, because the system had just been engaged, fully, completely, and he had no idea. She remained where she was, still, composed, her presence almost invisible within the larger movement of the crowd. Almost. Because there was something about stillness that unsettles those who rely on noise. A flight attendant glanced in her direction briefly, then looked away. The supervisor's gaze passed over her once, then dismissed her entirely. They had already categorized her, filed her away, irrelevant. And irrelevance is the most dangerous place to misplace power, because what is unseen is rarely challenged, and what is unchallenged is free to act. A faint shift occurred in the terminal's rhythm. Subtle, barely perceptible, a delay in the system's response time, a hesitation in the flow of information, a minor disruption that meant nothing to most, but everything to someone who understood structure. She noticed. Of course she noticed. Because she had been waiting for it, not with anticipation, with certainty. The first signal, small, controlled, but real. Her expression did not change. Her posture remained the same, but internally the sequence had begun. A chess grandmaster does not reveal intent in the opening moves. Sacrifices are made quietly, positions adjusted subtly, the board reshaped without drawing attention. Only at the end does the pattern become visible. Only at the end does the opponent understand, and by then it is too late. She did not move. She did not speak. She simply stood there, within the line they had assigned her, within the role they had defined for her, and she let the system continue. Because interruption at the wrong moment weakens impact. Timing, when precise, becomes force. Her phone remained still now. No more vibrations. No more interruptions. Because the message had already reached where it needed to go, and what it triggered was no longer in her hands. It was already in motion. The terminal continued its rhythm, unaware that something fundamental had shifted beneath it, unaware that control had changed hands, unaware that silence had already made its move. And the question lingered heavier now, impossible to ignore. What did that one message trigger? Collapse, when it begins, does not announce itself. It hesitates. The first delay was small enough to ignore. A pause between scans, a boarding pass that refused to register on the first attempt. The agent frowned slightly, tapping the screen with controlled impatience. Just a moment, he muttered. Routine friction. Nothing more. The passenger in front of him shifted, irritation surfacing in subtle movements, the tightening of a jaw, the glance toward a watch, the silent calculation of lost time. Behind the counter, another agent leaned over, offering assistance. Their voices lowered, their movements slightly less certain. Then the system stalled again. Longer this time. The scanner emitted a dull tone, not an error, not approval. Something in between. Indecision. Across the terminal, the rhythm faltered, not stopped, interrupted. A boarding announcement cut mid-sentence before restarting, its tone slightly distorted. Screens flickered for a fraction of a second, barely noticeable, but enough to disrupt flow. Passengers noticed, not consciously at first, but discomfort began to spread. The agent straightened, forcing a smile that did not reach his eyes. Apologies for the delay, he said louder now, as if volume could restore control. It did not. The line slowed. Momentum weakened, and systems, once slowed, reveal their fragility. At the edge of the economy line, she remained exactly where she had been, still, unmoved, untouched. Her gaze rested not on the disruption itself, but on the reactions it created, because disruption is only useful when it exposes behavior. A supervisor's phone vibrated, then another. Across the counter, a second device lit up. Notifications, unscheduled, unexpected. The supervisor stepped aside, her expression tightening as she read. Her posture shifted, confidence thinning at the edges. A message repeated across multiple screens. Urgent, internal, unplanned. The agent glanced toward her, searching for reassurance. He did not receive it. "I continue boarding," she said quickly, her tone clipped, controlled, but no longer steady. He obeyed, but the system did not. Another boarding pass failed, then another. The scanner paused longer each time, as if reconsidering every decision. Behind them, a quiet exchange turned into a whispered discussion. "What is happening? Is the system down?" "No, it cannot be. It was fine a minute ago." Assumptions formed, none accurate. The man in the blazer stepped forward again, impatience no longer concealed. "This is unacceptable," he said, his voice sharp, cutting through the growing uncertainty. "I have a connection to make." "Fix it." Demand, not request. His authority, once comfortable, now strained. The agent forced another smile, thinner this time. "We are experiencing a minor delay, sir. Minor." A word used to control perception, but perception was shifting, because delays, when repeated, become patterns, and patterns demand explanation. A second supervisor approached, her pace quicker, her expression more alert. She spoke in low tones, but urgency carried even in whispers. "Check the system logs," she said. "Something is not aligning. Not aligning." Careful language, avoiding the word failure. The security officer returned, drawn not by conflict, but by instability. His presence hovered again near the counter, his gaze moving between staff members, searching for clarity. He found none. Across the terminal, screens updated, then froze, then updated again. Departure time flickered. Uncertain. Passengers noticed this time. Clearly. The murmurs grew louder, confusion replacing patience. "What is going on? Are we boarding or not? Are we boarding or not? This is ridiculous. Voices overlapped, volume rising, order slipping, noise filled the space. Predictable, uncontrolled. The same voices that had enforced structure now fractured under its absence. Because loudness cannot sustain control. It can only demand it, and when demand is not met, it collapses into frustration. She watched. Not the system, the people. The agent who had dismissed her now checked his screen repeatedly, his movements sharper, less fluid. Confidence had left him. In its place, uncertainty. The supervisor's composure thinned further. Instructions became shorter, less precise. She glanced at her phone again, then again, as if searching for a solution that refused to arrive. The man in the blazer raised his voice once more, louder now, less composed. "This is poor management," he said. Completely unacceptable. Agreement followed, stronger this time. Because frustration amplifies easily. Another passenger joined. "This is why nothing runs on time anymore." Another voice. Somebody needs to take responsibility." Responsibility? A word rarely used until something breaks. The system strained under the weight of expectation. And expectation, when unmet, reveals truth. At the edge of it all, she remained unchanged. Stillness, in contrast to chaos. Her posture did not shift. Her expression did not tighten. Her breathing did not adjust. She was not part of the disruption. She was its center, invisible, untouched, because control, once established, does not react to noise. It observes its effect. A final notification appeared on the supervisor's phone. Different, heavier. Her eyes widened slightly, just enough to register impact. She looked toward the counter, then toward the terminal screens, then briefly toward the woman standing in the economy line. A glance, longer than before. Something had connected, not fully, but enough to disturb. "Hold boarding," the supervisor said suddenly, her voice cutting through the rising noise. Immediate, decisive, and too late. The agent froze for a fraction of a second before complying. The scanner powered down. The line stopped completely. Movement ceased. Silence followed. Not calm, tense, uncertain. Passengers looked at one another, confusion settling into something heavier. Delay had become disruption. Disruption had become failure, and failure demanded explanation, but no explanation came because the cause was not visible. It never is. She shifted her gaze once more across the terminal. Every piece now slightly out of place, every role unsettled, every assumption weakened, exactly as required. Her phone remained still, no vibrations, no calls. Because the message had already done its work, the system was no longer stable. It was responding to something deeper, something intentional. And the question moved through the space, unspoken but undeniable. Was this coincidence or a controlled collapse? The terminal's tension thickened, dense and charged, like air before a storm breaks. A new presence entered, a high-ranking airport executive. Sharp suit, sharper expression. Every movement carried purpose. Every gaze demanded attention. His steps cut through the chaos, commanding the staff without a word. Immediately, the tone of the room shifted. Arrogance and casual dismissiveness evaporated, replaced by urgency laced with fear. Staff who had laughed or dismissed authority moments ago now straightened, voices dropping an octave, movements slower, cautious. He reached the economy line, his eyes scanning the scene. The halted passengers, the frozen boarding agents, the supervisor biting the inside of her cheek. All anomalies coalesced into a single conclusion, and then he saw her. Her posture remained impeccable, calm, still, observant, silent. Recognition came in a fraction of a second, not from her words. She had none, not from a gesture. She gave none, from her presence alone, from the weight of the stillness she carried. The executive's stride faltered for just a heartbeat, enough for everyone around him to sense that she was no ordinary passenger. He spoke quickly, clipped, precise. Ma'am, I did not expect you here." And now the revelation unfurled. She was not simply a traveler. She was the CEO of a global conglomerate, one whose reach extended beyond borders, industries, and markets, a major stakeholder in the airline itself. A presence whose decisions could unravel careers, contracts, and entire operational networks in the blink of an eye. The agent's hands froze midair, the scanner forgotten. The supervisor blinked, lips parting as disbelief crashed into her confidence. The security officer stepped back, suddenly smaller, aware that he had been standing in front of someone whose authority far exceeded his own. Passengers murmured, sensing the shift, though none could name its cause. Silence fell, not polite silence. Not awkward hesitation, true silence. A vacuum where noise had once ruled. The The CEO remained still. Not a word, not a motion, not a sign of triumph or anger. The room waited, uncertain what action would follow. Because power does not announce itself. It does not scream. It decides. The staff who had assumed authority over her, who had dismissed her, who had mocked her place in the terminal, they understood too late the magnitude of their error. Not immediately in comprehension, not all at once, but in that heartbeat between expectation and reality, they felt it. The room had shifted beneath them. The center of gravity had moved. Her phone lay in her hand, still dark. Messages sent, calls declined. Decisions already executed beyond the view of anyone in this terminal. The executive approached, still tense, and lowered his voice. "Oh, ma'am, we will resolve this immediately." She nodded slightly. That was all. Not a concession, not a threat. Simply acknowledgement of the situation she had already shaped. No argument. No negotiation, no emotion displayed. She did not need to raise her voice. She did not need to show anger. The air itself had acknowledged her power. Every previously loud voice, the agent, the supervisor, the passengers, now hung in stillness, uncertain how to proceed, unsure if they should move, speak, or even breathe. All the control they had wielded moments ago had evaporated. She remained calm, distant, untouchable, and in that silence, spoken question rose heavier than any voice. Now that the power is clear, what will she do with it?